Okay, let's unpack this. For the longest time, the security playbook was, well, pretty simple, right? It was all about protecting the device.
Right. You threw AV on it.
Then you upgrade it to EDR, and that was kind of it. A lot of organizations felt they'd achieved a decent security posture.
But the reality is that hyper-focus on the endpoint has become, well, it's essentially obsolete.
The attackers just adapted faster than our defenses.
That is the crux of the issue. And our mission for you today is to really move past that endpoint-only mindset and fully understand whole-of-network coverage.
So what it is, exactly.
What it is, why it's so rapidly becoming the non-negotiable baseline for managed service providers, and crucially, how it detects those quiet multi-stage attacks that your device-centric tools miss completely.
And that's the paradox we all have to wrestle with, isn't it? Most modern breaches, I mean, statistically, they never involve a single piece of malware or some suspicious process that an EDR can flag.
Not at all. They start somewhere else.
They originate in cloud accounts, identity systems, maybe a firewall, SaaS apps, even a rogue IoT device somebody plugged into the wall. But when that breach happens, who gets held responsible?
It's always you, the service provider.
Exactly.
And if you look at the data, it's staggering. Nearly 80% of breaches involve some form of identity compromise. And here's the really terrifying part. Once an attacker gets that initial access, the lateral movement, them spreading across the internal network, that begins within minutes, sometimes seconds.
So if the front door is Microsoft 365 and the way they're moving around is with legitimate Windows tools, where should our security monitoring actually be focused?
It has to be everywhere. It can't just be that single device anymore.
Let's start with that fundamental shift then. Historically, that good enough stack, AV, EDR, a bit of email filtering,
Okay.
it was built for a world where malware was the main enemy.
It was the file-based era. The attack lived locally, you scanned for it, you blocked it. Simple. Now, we're firmly in the identity and tool-based era. The threat landscape didn't just move, it strategically sidestepped the endpoint completely. Attackers know you have EDR.
Let's expect.
They expect it. They know it looks for files and suspicious processes, so they just change their entire strategy.
And what does that look like on the ground for an MSP?
It looks like using the organization's own tools against them. Attackers love using legitimate admin protocols, WMI, SMB, PowerShell remoting. They steal credentials, they log in, and they just use these native tools to look around the network.
And because those are approved, signed operating system processes,
They're designed not to trigger alerts. They never have to drop a single malicious file onto the disk.
so an attacker is basically walking into the building with a key, dressed in the company uniform, using the employee elevator, and the EDR tool is just standing there saying, everything looks fine here.
Precisely. And we can't forget about the perimeter exploits.
Yeah, I
We
know.
constantly see vulnerabilities in VPNs, firewalls, edge appliances like FortiOS or Citrix.
Oh, all the time.
When an attacker exploits one of those, they bypass the perimeter entirely and jump straight into the internal network. No malware has to touch an endpoint for them to get that initial access.
Which brings us right back to that accountability gap. If your tooling only sees the world through the lens of a single operating system, you are blind to everything happening in the account systems, across the network wire, and inside the cloud.
And when that tooling is bypassed, the client doesn't blame the tool.
No, they blame the MSP they trusted.
That's why the very definition of being protected has had to change.
Now, when we talk to MSPs about moving to whole of network, I think the first reaction is often fear. They think, great, now I have to collect 1 million more logs and I'm just going to drown in data.
And that's where the industry has often failed to explain the concept. It is not about collecting more logs.
It's about correlation.
It's about correlation. It's so much more than just aggregation. Whole of network coverage is really a system, and it's built on 4 critical pillars that turn all that chaos into clarity.
Okay, what's pillar number 1?
The first is telemetry capture. And yes, you have to pull data from endpoints, but also from identity systems like Active Directory, cloud platforms like M365 and Azure, perimeter devices like firewalls and VPNs.
All the sources we just mentioned.
All of them. SaaS apps, internal network flow data. You have to open up the
Oh,
view.
that's the step that generates the data flood everyone's afraid of.
Which brings us directly to pillar number 2,
Yeah.
automatic correlation. This is the revolutionary part. Traditional SIEMs often need human analysts or really complex manual rules to connect separate logs.
Right.
True whole-of-network security automatically unifies and stitches that massive data set together for you.
So it's not just dumping all the files into a filing cabinet. It's having a librarian who's already organized them and is highlighting the suspicious connections between them.
That's a great analogy. Imagine you have 4 notes written by 4 different people in 4 different languages. They seem unrelated. Correlation translates them, puts them in order, and reveals they are all chapters in the same crime story.
And without automating that, you just can't scale.
You can't. So pillar 3 is detection. The system has to be able to identify attack chains that span multiple disparate systems. A single event might look fine. A user logging into the cloud is normal.
Perfectly normal.
But that login, followed seconds later by a change in mailbox rules, followed minutes later by an unusual internal server access, that tells a malicious story.
And the final pillar, number 4, must be alerting.
Exactly. And it ties directly into efficiency.
Yeah.
The goal isn't just to see everything, it's to get high-fidelity, context-rich alerts that your team can actually action.
Not 1,000 separate log dumps?
No. One alert that says, user X is compromised. Here's the full narrative of the attack from initial access to data staging.
That's the mental shift then? Endpoint-only security treats every device as an isolated island.
Whereas whole network coverage recognizes that the modern attack is a flowing narrative that crosses borders constantly.
Okay, let's look at the real-world consequences of this. We're going to walk through 5 specific blind spots. These are the insidious attacks that prove why EDR alone just cannot protect you today.
And these are all drawn directly from common incidents we see with small and medium businesses.
Let's start with number 1. MFA bypass leading to cloud account takeover.
This is at the top of the list for current client risk. The attacker uses MFA fatigue.
The push notifications spam?
Right, spamming the user with requests until they accidentally click approve, or they use token theft to compromise, say, a Microsoft 365 admin account.
And from the endpoint's perspective, this is completely invisible. The whole thing happens between the attacker's server and Microsoft's cloud.
EDR sees nothing. And once they're in, the consequences escalate so fast. We see things like mailbox forwarding rules being created to silently siphon off emails, SharePoint files being staged for exfiltration.
Or worse.
Or worse, the attacker changes the existing MFA methods or creates a whole new admin user to make sure they can get back in later.
And without monitoring the identity and cloud telemetry, you have no evidence of what happened. You are completely blind until the client calls you and says their files are gone. Which brings us to number 2, lateral movement, using legitimate Windows tools. We touched on this, but let's dive a little deeper. The attacker has stolen some basic credentials. Now what?
Now, they use native tools like WMI or PowerShell to just explore the internal network. They're not installing malware, they're just mapping out where the crown jewels are, where's the critical data, where's the domain controller.
And this is so stealthy by design. If you're only relying on EDR, this traffic looks exactly like a system administrator doing maintenance. It's an approved process.
But the whole network view connects the dots. It sees impossible traveler user logs into a laptop in San Francisco, then 5 minutes later, that same account uses WMI to run a command on a server in New York. That's not possible.
Or it sees an employee, Jane from accounting, suddenly accessing the production server database using WMI, a server she has never touched in her 3 years with the company.
That's the anomaly detection that saves you, and why this matters is so crucial. If you only detect the ransomware when it detonates, the moment the encryption starts, you've already lost.
It's too late.
It's way too late. Lateral movement is the phase where they disable the backups and get the keys to the kingdom. You have to detect the reconnaissance, not just the final payload.
Okay, blind spot number 3 is something physical. Rogue devices and shadow networks.
Think about that old unmanaged NAS device sitting in a corner, or the security camera system running on ancient firmware, or a Wi-Fi access point, a contractor installed that's not on your inventory list.
Somebody just plugs it in.
They plug it in, and it instantly becomes a massive vulnerability. And the endpoints, again, see absolutely nothing. It's not happening on their device.
But the network layer sees the truth.
It sees everything. It sees new MA addresses popping up. It sees internal scanning attempts coming from that new device, or maybe brute force attempts targeting servers coming from an IP address that shouldn't even be there. These unmanaged devices are one of the easiest ways for an attacker to get a physical foothold inside your perimeter.
Let's talk about that perimeter. Blind spot number 4 focuses on the front door. VPN or firewall exploits. We see this in the headlines all the time.
All the time. When these vulnerabilities are exploited, the attacker gets direct shell access to the firewall or the VPN appliance itself. The endpoint is totally oblivious until the attacker starts moving from there.
But the whole network view spots it immediately.
It spots the unusual VPN session, a sudden connection from an unexpected country. Or maybe the system sees a configuration change being made to the firewall itself, which is a critical piece of network telemetry.
And clients assume that since you manage their infrastructure, you should have known the second that attacker got past the gate. Without that telemetry, you can't prove you were watching.
Which leads us to our final blind spot, number 5. Quiet insider abuse. This isn't always a malicious outsider, is it?
No, sometimes it's the disgruntled employee who's about to leave.
Right, they copy sensitive client data to their personal cloud storage. Or the departing staff member sets up a hidden forwarding rule on their email to keep getting company comms.
The challenge here is intent. An endpoint tool can't look at someone copying files and call it malicious.
It can't. But whole-of-network coverage connects the dots of behavior. Why did this user log in at 2 a.m.? Why did they immediately access the confidential customer directory? And why, in the next step, did their account suddenly sync 50 gigabytes of data to an unapproved cloud storage service?
It's the whole story.
Only by correlating directory access, time of day, and cloud logs can you build that narrative of abuse and stop it before the data actually leaves.
So if the solution is to collect data from everywhere, endpoints, cloud, identity, the network, I have to ask, doesn't this just shift the burden of analysis onto the MSP? How can they possibly scale this?
Yeah, that is the essential question. And the goal isn't just more data, it's operational efficiency. It's fewer, better alerts. When that correlation works properly, it actually reduces the workload.
How so?
Instead of getting 10 separate low-level alerts from the firewall, the cloud, 3 different servers, you get one single ticket that says, active lateral movement detected, attacker utilizing WMI to reach DC.
This is where that multi-stage detection really shines. EDR can't connect this chain. An MFA bypass in the cloud leads to a mailbox rule change, allows access to SharePoint, results in exfiltration to an external IP.
To EDR, those are 4 separate, harmless activities in 4 different silos.
But the integrated platform sees that sequence.
It sees the sequence and instantly flags it as a confirmed multi-stage attack. It transforms that disconnected noise into an undeniable attack narrative.
And beyond just the security efficiency, this model gives you a huge advantage when it comes to liability, right? Demonstrating duty of care.
Oh, it's vital. If a breach does occur, the ability to provide audit-ready evidence is priceless. The reporting shows exactly what was monitored, including identity, cloud, and lateral movement, what was detected, and what actions were taken.
That documentation protects the MSP.
It proves you implemented the modern security baselines needed to cover the gaps that attackers are actually using today.
We have to talk about the build versus buy dilemma here. A highly motivated MSP could try to piece all this together themselves.
They could get a SIEM, a network detection and response tool, an identity access manager, log aggregation, write custom correlation rules.
But the cost is just tremendous, and it's not just financial.
Not at all. We're talking 7 or more new tools, easily over 100 hours of just initial integration, and then the ongoing burden of managing false positives, maintaining all those custom rules, and needing specialized, expensive security analysts on call 24/7.
That's For the vast majority of MSPs focused on small and medium businesses, building an in-house security operations center for this is impossible. Financially, operationally, it's just not feasible.
They need the outcome, that whole-of-network visibility, but they can't afford the maintenance and the overhead.
And that's the gap these integrated platforms are designed to fill.
Exactly. They deliver that enterprise-grade visibility and correlation without forcing the MSP to take on the prohibitive burden of building a custom security stack from the ground up.
So if we connect all this back to the bigger picture, the conclusion here seems pretty unavoidable. Whole-of-network coverage isn't some future tech or an expensive option for large enterprises anymore.
No, it's the only realistic way to protect modern clients and demonstrate that you're addressing the attack surface as it actually exists today.
Modern attacks don't live on a device.
They live in the gaps. They live in the space between identity, the cloud, the network, and device activity. You have to monitor the entire connected story.
So what does this all mean for you? I think the core lesson here is that protection has fundamentally moved beyond that single device.
Yeah.
Your security baseline has to encompass the entire digital life of the user and the network.
That is where you win the security battle today.
And this raises a really important final question for you to think about. If attackers are primarily relying on legitimate administration tools and compromised credentials, activities that look completely normal in isolation, How much of your organization's current security budget is still being spent defending against malware and files, activities that are no longer the primary attack vectors?
Something for you to mull over or explore on your own.